I think my life has a purpose now, right? I mean, I've been in healthcare for 20 something, 25 plus years, and love the industry. But I think now when I start thinking about the fact that we can move the needle for so many people, and actually and it takes some of the burden off their journey, I look at cancer as a blessing and a curse. It was a curse for what I went through, and it was the hardest year of my life. But I think it was a blessing because it gave me a chance to really relook at what I'm doing with myself and how do I now make a difference.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Daniel Leese podcast. Welcome back to another episode. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back to the show. If I could ask one small favor, at the end of this show, if you enjoy the conversation which I'm about to have, please head over to the audio channels that you're listening on and just give us a rating, because if you give us a rating, it helps us get noticed by a lot more people that are listening to the similar sort of podcast to this. And I speak to some incredible people every single week. And I just want to help shed light on what these people go through to help motivate and inspire you to go on and achieve great things as well. So let's get into this week's episode. I'm joined by a guest this week in line with the theme of November, talking to men across the world that have suffered in some form or way with cancer and are able to come out, fortunately, on the other side and shed a positive note. And today, I'm telling you now, is one incredible story where this week's guest nearly had his life taken away from him and luckily was able to come back and make a positive change to other people that are also going through cancer right in this moment. So please join me in welcoming this week's guest, Rahul. How are we doing, Rahul?
Good, thanks, Daniel. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. So get straight into it. Who are you and what do you do?
So my name is Rahul Mahadeven. I am a cancer survivor, as you said. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer 2 years ago. And I now run a company to help patients deal with the non-clinical challenges they face as they go through treatment. As I went through treatment, I think the reason I started the company was I met a lot of patients who were choosing to either delay treatment or not do treatment because they didn't have the non-clinical support they needed at home to get them through their journey. And so I realized, what can we do to really help them not worry about the stuff that's not important and really focus on what is important, which is their health.
Before we'd obviously spoken, I didn't realize what a lot of people had to go through. And I think obviously the States is obviously quite unique, right? Because it's very much a business, right? It's like healthcare in the UK, a little bit different. There's, you've got free healthcare systems. And then even here in the UAE, everyone has to have insurance from their employer. So people have some sort of safety net. But in the US, it's not really like that.
Well, I mean, I'll challenge that assumption a little bit, only because irrespective of where you live in the world, you're always going to have challenges that the health systems don't cover. So, most health systems don't cover the ability for somebody to watch your kids while you go for treatment, or needing funds for groceries, or not having enough money to take, an Uber or Lyft instead of the bus or the train to the hospital, right? So these non-clinical, what I would call activities of daily living challenges that patients face, I don't think it's systemic just for the US. I think it's true for any patient living in any country. Because while the health systems do cover, or health systems in different countries do cover medical costs of care, what they don't cover is non-medical challenges that a lot of us face as we go through treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to the first day then, because you had a history working within the medical industry, so you knew it quite well. But take us back to the day where you actually found out about the cancer that you had.
I would say it was an accident. I had no symptoms. I went for my annual checkup. Got blood tested. Had a high PSA score. Did a biopsy. And, January 4th, 2021, 3:30 in the afternoon, I was on a call with my oncologist who said, you've got prostate cancer and you have a week to decide what you want to do. And, I've always been as you said, I was working for a company that was building equipment to treat cancer patients. So I was in the healthcare and oncology space. But I think hearing it reflected on to you, puts everything in perspective, if you will. And I wasn't. We always talk about the patient. Every healthcare company I've been at and every hospital I've worked at, we've always talked about the patient being at the center of what we do. But we always build products to treat patients once they're on the table to get treated, right? What we forget sometimes is the challenges patients face to get to the table to be treated, right? And my belief when I was diagnosed was it doesn't matter how good the equipment is, it doesn't matter how good the software is, it doesn't matter how good the drugs are. None of that means anything if the patient can't get to where they need to go to take advantage of those tools, right? And so I really started focusing on that side of the journey versus the clinical side of the journey.
Yeah. And I mean, that's obviously a big shock, right? I mean, you go for a routine checkup, no symptoms. What stage were you diagnosed at?
Stage 3, borderline 4. So it was pretty advanced. But I'm a believer that no point dwelling on why it happened and just kind of figuring out how to deal with it. And I also realized there was nothing I could do, nothing I could eat or drink that would cure it. And so the rational thought was, how do you just navigate this as best you can? Learn through the process. So if there's an opportunity to kind of help others avoid what you're going through, can you pay it forward?
And what was the first step then? So your options, you had two choices, right? It was either live or die. But what was the treatment that you had to go through?
I mean, it was do you do surgery and remove the prostate, or do you kind of do radiation and chemo and hormone therapy and which is a longer recovery process and a longer process, if you will, than surgery. But I was off the point when I went through treatment that said, for me, what was important is quality of life versus longevity, right? And I think that's a personal decision that every patient has to make. And I remember telling my mom and my family that I'm going to pick whatever treatment I felt would give me the best quality of life for as long as I have, versus living till I'm 90 or 100 but having not the greatest quality of life. And so that was my personal choice. I know people who've made the other, and I think there's no right or wrong answer. I think every patient has to, it's a very personal decision that every patient has to make. And I think the biggest thing is when the patient makes that decision, having the people that care about them rally around them to support whatever that decision is the most important thing.
Yeah. And what was the decision that you took?
I decided to go down the path of, radiation and hormone therapy and brachysurgery and kind of everything else. And even though I knew the journey would be longer, I think from my perspective after, and I didn't even know what questions to ask, right? The good thing was I actually worked for a cancer company that I had access to people who were oncologists who were treating other patients. And, I was lucky to have a network of people that I had who would ask me to think about things that I would never have thought about on my own, right? And unfortunately, most people don't have that luxury, right? They see the first doctor they see, they're being told what their options are, and they pick an option without really having the luxury of being able to talk to multiple people and being able to have that conversation with multiple people. So I do think I'm a little privileged from that perspective.
Yeah. And how long was your treatment like in total from kind of like beginning? Because I suppose when you go into this treatment, there's no guarantees that it's going to work, right?
If you define treatment as from when you finish with most of the side effects of your hormone therapy and everything else, right? I think I started in February and I stopped feeling symptoms probably November. My actual radiation was about a month and a half or so, but then hormone therapy and then brachy surgery and so on and so forth. So 2021 was a wash.
So the stages of treatment is like chemotherapy, and then after that it's the hormone therapy that comes next. Yeah.
No, hormone therapy. You start with hormone therapy. At least I did. Right. We started with hormone therapy, and then you go into radiation. Then you go and then you do your brachy and your radiation, and then you just monitor and track it. And I think your symptoms of your hormone therapy, at least for me, I think end of November, about this time about 2 years ago is when I started feeling normal, right? I mean, normal as best you can describe normal. But
Yeah.
diagnosed January 4th and started feeling normal again, probably end of November, early December. So
So the whole year basically,
yeah, 21
and it
was
was just off
the
the back
most.
of COVID,
Yeah, it was about
back of all on the back of all the lockdowns, and then you had a year of being
well,
basically in lockdown in your own body, right?
the funny thing was I almost didn't go to my primary care doctor to go get tested because it was in the middle of COVID, right? And so I was toying back and forth between, do I want to go see her, do I not want to go see her? Um, and then I finally, it was October, and it's like, what the hell? Just go and make an appointment. Even though you have to get COVID tested, you have to wear a mask, you have to do
Yeah.
this, you have to do that.
Okay, so I know this is obviously quite a personal question, but I would like to ask it anyway because I want to try and get the listeners' mindset into kind of how you were feeling. So you said about obviously it took you around a year to start feeling normal again. So what was it you were feeling when you were going through the hormone replacement therapy and also the chemotherapy? How did it feel?
Weak, right? I mean, I think that's the easiest way to. I mean, you're when you go through hormone therapy, at least when I went through it, you go through. Think about it being, menopause on steroids, right? You go through hot flashes and cold
Yeah.
flashes, and you go through body temperature changes, and uh, you kind of shut down your testosterone, so you have no energy to do pretty much anything, right? I remember playing tennis, and I literally couldn't jump to serve, right? That's I was on the court, I was trying, I couldn't move. I mean, it was like I had lead in my feet, couldn't move. I get tired, and so I think it just and then between radiation, it just drains you. It just like you just feel exhausted. You feel frustrated. There. I will be honest. There were days where I'm like, I can't do this. Not, and it was. I think the worst part of it was when I was going through days where I would literally go from a hot flash to a cold flash every 15 minutes, right? And the frustrating part was I would have to get up, take off sweats, put back on. So I mean, change clothes every 15 minutes because I was just uncomfortable, right? And it's that constant 24 hours a day, 15 minutes every 15 minutes, standing up, putting on socks, standing up, taking off sock. That mentally just drains on you. And I had somebody I met who just said, "Listen, this is going to be This is going to be tough. Suck it up. There's light at the end. There's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. Just make it through." There were days where I didn't think I would. There were days where I was just like, "This is just not sustainable." But then I remember what he said to me, and I said, "All right, I'm just gonna, there will be good days. Will be there eventually." I mean, I'd wake up 15 times a night because I'd be sweating, right? And all of a sudden I'd be drenched in sweat.
Wow.
And
Mm.
and so I think mentally, I think half the battle with cancer is it's a mental fight, right? I mean, your body's going to react the way it's going to react, and everybody's body reacts differently to treatment. A big part of it is mental, right? And it's not just you; it's also having others recognize that all they can do is be there to support you, right? The constant, how are you feeling? What are you
Yeah.
doing? After a while, just gets annoying, right? It's like, all right, I'll tell you what I need, but just having people around who can listen, right, and just be there for you, and
Yeah.
unless they've gone through it, they're not going to understand it. They're going to be empathetic, but it's completely different talking to somebody who's been through it before versus talking to somebody who hasn't, right? And which is why I've now volunteered to be a mentor angel for other people going through what I went through. If I can provide even a little bit of
Mm.
comfort knowing that you're not alone. I've been through it. Um, that's kind of a way to kind of pay it forward.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we did a podcast last week with somebody who had testicular cancer twice, and he said very similar thing. He was just like, people would try and say things to console you to make it be like, oh well, you've had both testicles removed, but you can always adopt children and stuff like that. And whilst he knew that it wasn't coming from a place of a hurtful place, it was coming from a place of like wanting to care. It just wasn't what he wanted. And he's just like, you just can't, there's no words to describe what you need. It's just you just don't want people saying, oh, but what about this or what about that? And even as well, like, I think one of the things he mentioned as well is that he didn't want people to feel sorry for him either. He wanted people to like be around him that would cheer him up, kind of like crack jokes, make things feel like they were normal still. And that's what helped him get through. So who would you say was like the biggest part of that role then? Who played the biggest role for you when in that time?
I mean, I think my family, right? I mean, my wife, my kids, my brothers, my mom. I mean, friends. I mean, I've got friends in Dubai who were extremely supportive when I went through what I'm going through and what I went through, and I think you're right. I think everyone who cares about you comes at it with good intentions, right? And I think that's how you have to keep it. But I think as a patient, what you want to do is try and just take your mind off what you were doing, right? And it's the small distractions. Let's go
Yeah.
for a walk. Let's go. I mean, I had a friend of mine who wanted to play tennis with me when I was going through it, and I knew I couldn't play, but it was just getting out of the house, right? Because if you're sitting in the house, your mind's going to wander, and like you're just going to you just need distractions, right? And so I think just and I remember telling my kids, I'm like, and they were 15 and 17 at the time, and I said, when I panic, you panic. Until then, just act as if we're kind of going through life, and when you start seeing me panic, then you react. And until then, I don't want to hear how you're feeling. I don't want to hear what you're doing. I know, even though I know, you mean well, because that just reminds me that I'm going through something, right? And so, but I also, honestly, Daniel, I didn't ask a lot of people to help me, right? And that's not because I didn't need any help, but I just didn't want to bother people. I didn't want to be a burden on people. I didn't want to. I know people were busy, and I know they would have helped if I'd asked. But I also knew that this is a personal feeling, and I think most patients go through this, is we don't want to reach out to people that care about us to help us, because we don't want to add a burden to their lives that we're dealing with already. And the sad thing is, there's probably a lot of people out there who do want to help, but they just don't know what the patient needs because the patient never tells them.
Yeah, 100%. And how much of a relief was it for you when you got the news that obviously the treatment was working and that there was kind of like it was starting to regress a little bit?
I mean, it was. I mean, I may be an exception, but I'm a very practical. I mean, I had heart surgery when I was 28, so I've been through health issues before. My philosophy on life is, listen, don't take a day for granted. You never know when it's not going to happen, so make the most of it. And being able to, on the clinical side, all you can do is trust your physicians. All you can do is trust the treatment and just say, listen, if it's going to work, it's going to work. There were days where I didn't feel like driving to the hospital and going for treatment, and I just had to suck it up and say, you know what, ride through it. There were days where I didn't want to get out of bed, and so that's why I think half the battle with any disease, and not just cancer, but any chronic disease, is a mental fight, right? If you're mentally, and that's not easy to do, right? You need people around you who can be your pick me up, who can be the person that says, hey, listen, I know you don't want to do something, but suck it up and do it, right? And I'll be there with you as we go through it. And I think I think allowing yourself to be vulnerable, I think is as important for at least it was for me. And I'll speak to my own situation. Was important, at least with the family, with my immediate family, right? I wasn't vulnerable with friends and with other friends, not because I didn't want to be, but because I just didn't know how to be. And so I think my advice to any patient is, listen, there are people who care about you, who want to help you, and oftentimes it comes from people that you least expected, right? But if you don't give them a chance, one of the things that one of my friends once said to me was, asking for help is not a burden on somebody else. It's a gift you're giving someone to have an opportunity to do something for you. And I think that internalized for
Yeah.
me, you know, how to deal with what I was dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true, because the thing is, when you think about it, right, you rewind even 150 to, we don't even have to go thousands of years ago. We can only go hundreds of years ago. But the point I'm getting at is that we all we lived in villages or tribes, and we was with that tribe all the time. And it's like an extended family. Nowadays, society, I suppose we've got into this habit of just being quite individual and just being quite, whereas our DNA is built to be around a community of people, and for some reason, like you say, over time, it's got to the point where everything's got very individual, and a lot of things have changed. So yeah, I mean, and if you look at if you read the book, I don't know if you've ever read the book Homo Sapiens. It talks about kind of like the history of humankind and the human race, and it's fascinating how much we've changed since those days. Obviously, we've evolved a lot, but we've come away from, like you say, being together amongst each other, because that's one thing that really helps us the most. But so you get the all clear, but in between this time, had you already thought about WiTT?
Yeah, it had percolated. So when I was in the hospital, and I just met patients who were choosing to either delay treatment or not do treatment because they didn't have the support they needed at home, right? And I was at the hospital, or I was talking to my daughter on one day, and I was just telling her about patients I'd met who, would take the bus from home to the hospital, and bus wouldn't show up, and they'd miss their appointment, and then they couldn't stay all day, so they had to because they had to head back because they had to watch their kids, or met patients who were choosing to not take their medication because they needed the money to pay for food for their families, and, you name it, right? And I started talking to patients, and I asked them, why don't you ask your friends? Why don't you ask your family to help? And I think the consistent theme I got was, we need help, but I don't want to be a burden or an imposition on somebody else. And so we don't ask, right? And so I as I went through my treatment in the hospital, and as I started talking to, probably talked about over 200 patients when I was going through treatment. It was a consistent theme came forward. And so I remember my daughter saying to me, I remember telling her, I said, you and I will never have to choose home over health, because we have a network, we have a support, we have financial means. We're not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but we have the connections we need to kind of get through this journey. But we're the exception, we're not the rule. There's more people out there who don't have what we have because of what we're going through. And she looked at me and she said, well, why don't you quit your job and start a company to help those people, right? And that's kind of the genesis of WiTT, in terms of, from the mouth of babes, if you will, where, I planted a seed in my head saying, well, you've been in healthcare for as long as you have, you always talk about the patient, do something to help patients. That was the genesis of WiTT.
So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty impressive thing to do whilst recovering from cancer, thinking about starting a business just to help others. But I think going back to, that's one thing that I talked about with, I've been so lucky to speak to so many different people, right? That one thing that I've learned is that the most fulfillment that I get is actually from helping others. When you help somebody else, there's like a feeling inside which cannot be matched. No big business deal, no buying any gift or anything like that, or a nice watch or going out for a nice dinner, is just no way near what the experience of actually helping someone else feels like.
Yeah, I'll put my business hat on for a second. I think you can do both. I think you can build a successful business, right, and have a huge social impact, right? And I think that's kind of where my heart's now
No,
is.
yeah, of course.
I believe I got cancer for a reason. Don't waste it. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been in business for the last 20 something years. Early stage startups. I've been in the hospital side. And I finally said, listen, take your diagnosis. See if you can move the needle for those who are less fortunate than you, but do it in a way where you can actually build a successful company that has the biggest impact globally for as many people as you can, right? And so if you can combine those two things, you can leave a legacy, you can make a difference, and so that's kind of my philosophy now.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the business side of it shortly then. So what does WiTT actually stand for?
WiTT stands for We're in this together, right? And it goes back to your village example, which is I believe it does take us all to kind of work together to make a difference for someone, right? And I wanted, I have to give my daughter credit for the name as well, because she came up with the name and said, listen, we're in this together, because you truly are. It does take a village to get a patient through whatever they're going through, right? And a lot of times patients don't have the village around them to do it. And so how do you build something that gives them the ability to do that?
And how long has the business been going now?
So we started the company in December of 2021. We launched the product in May of 22. So we've been a company for almost 2 years now. But we've been out with the
Nice.
product to help patients for about a year and a half.
Perfect. And how many members do you have now to the platform?
As of, I think now we've got about 980 plus patients on the platform. I know we've been very deliberate and, methodically practical in terms of how we launched it out, because you're dealing with patients and you're dealing with people who are struggling with challenges. I want to make sure that we do it right versus do it quick. I think if you build it right, the word will get out. But I've been very
Yeah.
very focused on making sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's, and we make sure that we can actually have an impact on patients as we go forward, before we open the floodgates and say, okay, let's just go out and spend time on marketing and messaging and branding and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Have you had to kind of like say to anyone that they're not able to join the platform due to growth reasons? Because I can assume, obviously, when a lot of people that are in this position hear about this, I couldn't imagine anyone saying no, I don't want to be a part of it. So has that been an issue for you at all? Or
Well, I mean, I think one thing I tell people is, any platform you join, right? There's no guarantee that you're going to get everything you ask for, right? It isn't, because there's just a lot of things people need that they're not going to get fulfilled. But my philosophy is, if you can get 5, 10, 15, 20% of what you ask for filled, that just eases the burden a little bit on what you're going through, right? And so we've intentionally started
yeah,
primarily in the US, initially, because I want to make sure that we get it right. There is a strategy to kind of take WiTT global, but because of how we deal with money transfer and people supporting other people, we've just got to there's a lot more I's to dot and T's to cross. And so for right now, we're really focused in the US, and then expand beyond that down the road.
and what would you say what is the kind of like, what are the offerings at the moment that the platform offers, like in terms of what if somebody joins, what can they expect to see?
So think about WiTT as a combination of three different industries, right? One of the things that I realized early on was, patients need help, but they don't like to ask people to help them, right? And so there's this sense of, there's inherent stigma of asking for help. And so we took, if you think about a wedding registry or birth registry, the concept of those, where people can create registries and ask for the support they need without guilt of asking, because they're not asking Daniel to buy them something for their wedding. They're just saying, listen, if you want to give me a gift, go to my registry, see what I need, and you choose how little or how much you want to give me. So we said, let's take that concept and allow a patient to create a support registry of all the financial and non-financial things they need. Because sometimes people don't need money. Sometimes people just need somebody to hang out with them, or go for a walk with them, or have dinner with them, or whatever. And so allow the patient to kind of create their own support registry. Combine that with the best of crowdsourcing. So take the best of a GoFundMe, of an Indiegogo, of other crowdsourcing sites, and then build a fintech platform in the back end that allows an easy transfer of funds for patients. And so you take the best of wedding registry, crowdsourcing, and fintech, put it together. My belief is that you can create a platform where patients don't feel guilty about asking for help, number one. Number two, they can take advantage of all the people that want to help them by giving them a platform in which those people know what they need help with. And by doing that, I think you can start chipping away at some of the challenges that patients face as they go through treatment. Right. So,
Yeah.
patients can ask for whatever they want. The question is, can they, we put the onus on the patient to say, can you now let as many people in your network know that you need help, so that they can help you, as you go through whatever you're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, we live in a world where certain people might take advantage of stuff like this. So how do you go around? Because obviously it's a very sensitive topic where somebody's obviously going through cancer treatment, needing some support. But then, have you ever had any profiles that have tried to join the platform? And then, like, is there a vetting process to kind of fizz out, like, if anyone's trying to kind of scam people?
Yeah. So what we do is anyone can sign up and invite their friends and family to support them. And I made a decision early on that if you want to scam your friends and family, that's on you, right? I'm not gonna. That's your relationship between your friends and family. However, when someone wants to get support from people who are not their friends and family, so they want their profiles to be public, and they want other people to see what they're going through and support them. In that case, we have a vetting process that we've got patented in our product that allows us to make sure that anybody that goes to our website and sees a patient that they want to support has been vetted as a real patient by the organization that they're a member of, so that when someone is giving, they know that they're giving to somebody in need, right? And it's not. And so we've taken steps to ensure that there's some level of verification and vetting for patients who would like to have people outside their friends and family support them.
Okay. And then when it comes to, I mean, you've obviously got your support registry, so that's where people will ask for things. And I assume that that's generally stuff like babysitting, food, being able to get to places back and forwards, as you said, go out for dinner or go out for walks with people. Is there any like medical services that are on the platform as well?
We've been very careful to avoid being clinical in nature, but we've had patients ask for money for counseling services or money for IVF treatment, right? Or so they've asked. I've seen people ask for funds that can be used for clinical activities, right? I need money for to pay my dentist because the chemo that I'm taking has affected my teeth, right? I mean, so we've seen requests like that, but we've been very careful to stay away from the clinical side of care because there's enough companies out there who are doing great work that focus on the clinical side of care that I said let them do what they do, right? There's all these other barriers that patients face that impact their ability to get treatment, and that's the area that we're focused on.
Yeah. So, but what I meant by that question was, is there any hospitals that you work with for the platform which can help actually get medical treatments?
Yes, we're working with all. So right now we're talking to numerous hospitals that share the platform with their patients. Now, one of the things we've also said as a product is patients don't know who WiTT is, right? But the patients do know who their hospitals are, right? And so one of the things we've done is we've said, can we take this platform and basically white label it for organizations? Because there's a certain element of trust you build between the patient and the organization they're being treated at. And if you can offer this platform as a tool from the organization they're being treated at, there is a greater likelihood that they're going to sign up, they're going to use it, they're going to share it, they're going to be engaged. And so, if our goal is to help as many people as possible globally do this, there's one way to kind of say, let's just go down and build our own brand and do it our way. Or there's a way of doing, you can do that and you can actually partner with organizations to say, NHS, let's make this an NHS platform to share with the patients across the NHS that you work with. That's going to have a much bigger impact than asking a patient to sign up with WiTT, who they may have never heard of. They don't know who we are, and so on and so forth, right? So, ultimately the goal is still the same. How do you touch as many lives as possible in a positive way? And what's the fastest path to get there?
And how would it work then with the, like, when a hospital's providing medical services and stuff? I assume they're probably not doing that free of cost, right?
So I want to just kind of keep something. So what the hospital does with the patient is completely separate from what we do, right? So what we do is we when a hospital licenses our platform for them, think of the platform as a resource tool for their patients, right? So this is a tool that they can give their patients that
Yeah.
says, hey, you know what, as you go through treatment, here's a resource that may help you get some of the support that you need that we may not be able to provide for you, because we're focused on your treatment, we're focused on your medication, we're focused on, all the clinical side of care. But there may be things that you're going through that we don't provide services for, that your friends and family and other people can support
Mm.
you on, right? you know um,
Yeah.
being there at night to talk to about how you're feeling, right? Tell people that you need that, and somebody will I'm sure one of your friends will just come and hang out with you in the evening and have a conversation. So we basically segment, kind of draw the line between non-clinical support and clinical support, and we let the hospital take the clinical side. What we do is offer the platform that they can license from us, right? And they pay us a monthly license fee to use the platform, and they can then make that platform available to their patients. And the whole idea is, if you can address some of these non-clinical challenges, you're more likely to see patients comply with and adhere to treatment, which should then imply that
Yeah.
they're going to end up with better outcomes as they go forward.
Yeah. So it's basically just removing the roadblock to all the outside issues that are facing within, that stop people having the medical treatment. So it's always like they've got the medical treatment to go for. It's just they need help with everything else.
Yeah. And how do you remove those obstacles, so that, I always believe, if you can solve those problems, they can focus on what truly is important, which is their health, right? There's more people than not who are so
Yeah.
concerned about all these other things that they don't focus on their treatment, right? And then they miss
Mm.
appointments, they don't take their medication, they even though they want to, which then ends up in worse outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, now that the platform has been trading for a couple of years as well, well, I say a couple of years, a year or so properly. Um, have you been able to kind of touch base with people and hear about success stories?
We've had a lot of patients give us feedback on just how much it's made a difference to them, and a lot of them don't receive I mean, it's not like we're not a charity, right? So we don't. There's not that we have this big pool of money we give them. This is about them building a social network of their friends and family to support them. And I receive half a dozen emails a day from people saying, this has helped. And even if it was something as small as, $25 to help with groceries, or, 50 to help with transportation, what may seem like a small amount to us is a big amount to a lot of other people. And so I think just the gratitude of being able to ask for help without guilt, without feeling guilty, just breaks such a fundamental barrier for patients, that, I think it frees them up from saying, okay, I don't have to go on this journey alone. Like for me, for example, I didn't need financial support. I would have loved to have somebody like Daniel come with me to the gym every day, just to kind of take my mind off my treatment, right? That's all I needed. But I didn't ask a single person to come to the gym with me,
Yeah.
because I felt that they were busy with work, and I don't want to bother them, and I didn't want to deal with them. And so that is my issue, not their issue. But that's kind of why we've built this platform, to say, listen, let's break down the barriers of asking for help, and how do you really think about, supporting patients.
Yeah. And I suppose obviously, with platforms like this, like nowadays we live in a world where everything costs money to, you know, just to stand up nowadays, you have to pay money. So how are you able to make like this some form of business? Because I suppose when it's a platform where you're actually helping others and giving and so on, just to build the platform in itself, that is going to be a lot of money, right? So
There has been. I mean, so we end up licensing the platform to hospitals and health systems, so and pharma companies and nonprofits, and so we make a monthly license fee when we charge hospital, when we charge for white labeling the platform. We have other revenue models that we've built into the platform that allows us to um, build a profitable company. Um, this is, while this is not a nonprofit charity, we do have a nonprofit side of what we do, and so we've got a for-profit business that is growing, and we've got a nonprofit side that is growing as well. And so the idea is to build a successful business right? By generating revenue through a variety of sources, but at the same time staying true to what our core value is, which is impacting the lives of people who are going through life-changing challenges.
Yeah, yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you're struggling to make ends meet, this platform's not going to be beneficial for anyone because it's going to be struggling to move, right? So no, 100%, and it's such a good point. But we've obviously covered a bit on the business and stuff, and a bit about what WiTT does and how you've helped some people. But before we kind of do a bit of a close on the podcast, I want to ask you a question, because you mentioned something earlier on about living every day like it's your last, because you don't know when it's gonna end. What would you say that you're doing now differently to what you did pre-cancer?
I think my life has a purpose now, right? I mean, I've been in healthcare for 25 plus years, and love the industry. But I think now when I start thinking about the fact that we can move the needle for so many people, and actually, and it takes some of the burden off their journey. I look at cancer as a blessing and a curse. It was a curse for what I went through, and it was the hardest year of my life. But I think it was a blessing because it gave me a chance to really relook at what I'm doing with myself, and how do I now make a difference working. I would have never met somebody like you. I would have never met the people I've met if I hadn't gone through what I went through. And so for me, that there's a huge positive in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my side, being able to just share a story like this, which is one of inspiration to go through what you went through, but then to come out the other side and actually use that to go on and help people is truly. And I said this when we first spoke, is a true testament to you. So I really do wish you all the success with the platform, and I wish you all the success with everything you do. And I will look forward to talking more about this in the future when everything keeps growing and you start to expand globally and stuff, and we can talk about all the global expansions that you have planned. But it's been a pleasure to chat with you. It's been super. We obviously live in different time zones. For the people listening, Rahul lives in the States, and there's like a 12-hour difference. So there's never a convenient time to record this. But Rahul got up nice and early today and to be able to kind of share this inspiration and that. So all I ask is that we'll post where you can find Rahul, and go and give him a follow and follow his journey and what he's doing to help people. But yeah, Rahul, thank you so much for obviously giving the insight into what you do and a bit about your journey and stuff. I really do appreciate it. I know there's some kind of questions in there that might be difficult to answer and bring up certain emotions, let's say. So I do appreciate you being as open and honest with us as possible. And I thank you very much.
Thank you for all you do, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. And hopefully this is the first of many conversations we have together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much.
Take care.
For those listening in, thank you for tuning into the podcast. As I said, each week I speak to amazing people like Rahul. So if you want to hear the content each and every week, do follow us on whatever platform you're listening on. And if you did enjoy that story, please do give us a 5-star rating on the audio platforms that you're listening on. Unfortunately, I've got people in my life at the moment that are currently suffering with this awful disease. So also, if you have the same, and you know somebody that needs to hear this story, where they know that there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, we can understand and appreciate that in these difficult times, sometimes you feel like maybe, there's no light there, but there is. And, we just hope that these sort of messages that we share every week can help bring some inspiration to you and your journey. So thank you for listening in, everyone. Another amazing episode on the Daniel Leese podcast. Make sure you subscribe, follow, 5-star rating, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next week.